focusing in one main positive point, and that is we are one race, the human race. And we really would like to showcase through our full and rich program of speakers whom they are representing the various community organizations. 所以我们今天呢，最主要要讲的就是说，我们实际上就是一种人。人类，然后我们今天很高兴有很丰富的讲员们，他们都是代表一些我们社区非常好的机构。Because of such rich program of speakers, we will have a lot of excellent information posted in the chat room. So please do feel free. It could be either at the bottom of your screen or on the top of your screen to check onto the chat and then see all the background information or supplemental information as well. 我们今天因为这个讲员非常的丰富哈，所以呢，我们在这里有很多的这些资讯，我们是在那个 CHAT chat 那边，您点一下。也可以看到很多其他的丰富的资讯。So without further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to our moderators. 我们今天有2位主持人，他们要跟我们一一的来介绍今天的讲员。We have Mr. Isaac Han, who is the vice president of our club, and we also have attorney Kelly Ryan, who is the president of San Marino City Club. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Sophia. It's an honor to be here today and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could join us on a Sunday afternoon to talk about a really important issue that's impacting our community. I'm here to introduce today's event objectives. It's a positive event. That is, we're trying to give you some information that we think is important for all to take positive action in our community and to begin what we believe is an important discussion for our community about racism and hate. We've got a very diverse group of panelists who have different perspectives and get a conversation. I think that's important for all of us to at least come away at the end of the day with steps to begin from real issues in our local community. So we have some challenges. We're going to begin some steps, I think, to act as one community, as Sophia introduced us all to, that we're all one human race, but we do have some things I think that are important to discuss. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce, because I don't see him here, our first and main speaker today, and that is Chief John Encontro, who is the head of law enforcement for the city of San Marino, and who's going to, I think, it's an issue that affects all of us. So, Chief, without further ado, take it away.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me now. I've had to switch to a couple different computers to get this thing working. But I want to thank East Meets West. I also want to thank the coalition of organizations within the city of San Marino for moving forward with this. It started with a small idea between myself and several other members of the community. And based upon everyone's input, we've put together an amazing group of community members, people outside our community, experts, people living these things each and every day, and all working towards a positive outcome for all people. As it was said earlier, hate is not just something that is exclusive to one group or another. It involves many, many people. And when I'm talking, I'll be talking about the experiences in the city of San Marino. You may have different experiences with the law enforcement agency that works in your community. You may have different responses. You may have different outcomes. But speaking as the chief of police in the city of San Marino, I'll be talking about what we do and how we do it and how we work with the community. I think we have a pretty special department, and it's pretty special because of the people that we serve and protect each and every day, and about our willingness and our desire to help people and make sure that this is a wonderful place to live, visit, and work in. First of all, I think it's important to clear up and understand exactly what's a hate crime and what is a hate incident. And for us in law enforcement, we look at those two things. First of all, a hate crime is going to be something where there is an attack on a person based upon their age, their race, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation or identification, religion. And it also is going to include an attack or it's motivated by creating attack or it's motivated by these things. And it has to have a crime attached to it. And that crime can be something as simple as a battery, where someone is touching another person without their consent, where they are committing a vandalism. Most oftentimes we will see a hate crime involving someone spray painting a swastika on a Jewish synagogue, or it may be someone painting or marring the appearance of another religious institution. It can also be threats to where someone says directed at a person because of your race, your age, your religion, I'm going to hit you, or I'm going to, and you believe that there's going to be an actual physical threat based upon those things. And a hate incident gets a little more murky. And before I go into that, when there's a hate crime, law enforcement has a specific role, and our role is to investigate the crime and to provide information for the district attorney's office or even the federal government, depending upon the severity and other issues associated with that crime, and for their prosecution, where we become witnesses, gather evidence, and provide that to them. When it comes to a hate incident, oftentimes we have to remember that in the United States, with the First Amendment, we have the freedom of speech. And although there may be speech that to some is abhorrent and is filled with hate, but if it's not associated with a crime, then it's not a hate crime, and it can become a hate incident. We also investigate those issues because there may be circumstances surrounding a person who's making these hateful comments or distributing these hateful leaflets, where it then is connected to crimes in other jurisdictions, or it can be connected to crimes within our jurisdiction. So having reported incidents of hate is extremely important. Also, within city government, county government, and state and federal, there are organizations that we can reach out to, that we have resources, just as many of you will hear today from the different people on the panel. And there's other things that we can do with providing services to the person who's the offender. And when I say providing services, there's education, there's intervention, there's those type of things. If it got to the point of a hate crime, then within the hate crime, not everyone is going to be prosecuted and sent to jail. And sometimes there's a reluctance to report these incidents because there's a fear that someone is going to be jailed, that their lives are going to be ruined forever, or whatever is going through the victim's mind. And unfortunately, people are compassionate, people are respectful, and they may not want something to happen to someone. But then there's a diversion, and we can recommend a diversion. There is an organization within this area that offers, through the courts, through the DA's office, a one-on-one intervention or diversion where the offender sits down with a counselor, with a person involved in a diversion program, and they examine what the reasons are and of this hate and how it can be fixed, but also explaining to them that you can't do this. This is not right. This is illegal. And this is your one shot, that if you continue to do this, you could face criminal penalties where you're placed in jail or fined or something like that. So for us, it's important that we have information. It's also important for us because we can work with our community groups, we can work with other parts of the city government and provide opportunities for people to learn about others. For some of you who don't know me, as I've been the chief here for 6.5 years, I have 36 years with the Los Angeles Police Department prior to coming here. But when you look at me, you may have a certain idea or conception of, oh, okay, he's an old white guy. Well, I'm 50% Sicilian. So I grew up hearing derogatory terms about Sicilians. I'm married to a Mexican-American woman, and I've seen and heard things. I have my daughter-in-law, one of mine, is from Kenya, and she is a political refugee. And the National Police harmed one of her family members, in fact, killed one of her family members, and she and her parents moved to the United States to escape that kind of hate and persecution. And I have 2 biracial grandsons. So my concern is not only as the police chief of how am I protecting the city, but intervening when there are hate incidents, and doing it the safe way and the right way. And there's going to be people that are going to be talking about that. And there's programs that are available on how to intervene if you're a bystander or how to react as a victim. But my concern is, how are my grandsons going to be treated? How is my daughter-in-law going to be treated, my wife? And so it's very personal for me. So the motivation for me to participate in this, to be part of this, to provide the best service that we possibly can to our community in San Marino, is based not only on my oath of office and my professional desire to be the best police chief and best police officer I possibly can to all members of our community, but also to my family. And that's a strong desire, as we all know, that we want to take care of our family. So these are things that are important to us. So for those of you that live in San Marino, there are people that are hesitant to report. And some of it is based, some may say, on culture, some of it may be on life experience, some of it may be, I don't want to get involved, or I really don't want someone to get harmed. Well, it's important to report it because there's maybe other victims, and most likely there are. And they may be victims of a hate incident, of hate speech that may be protected by the First Amendment or is protected by the First Amendment. But it also may be where they are directly victims of a hate crime. So reporting it is important so that we can protect not only you as the victim reporting, but these other people in the past and perhaps other people in the future. In San Marino, we have not had a hate crime while I've been here, and we have not had a hate incident. But it doesn't mean it hasn't occurred. It doesn't mean that something inappropriate has happened or not happened, because we're hesitant to get involved. But I think when I look at this group of panelists, when I see the large number, we've got 92 people participating in this wonderful event, that people are concerned and people really want to make a difference, and people really want something special to happen in our world. And unfortunately, this world is full of, let me correct that, this country has a number of people that want to perpetuate hate, regardless of who you are, whether you're from Asian background, race, ethnicity, Pacific Islander, whether you are Hispanic, African American. We need to make sure that we work together. We need to ensure that we learn from each other about the beautiful customs and rights and experiences of others in our community, and get to know each other. This is what we're doing here today, is we're getting to know each other, and we're getting to be friends, and we're understanding the importance of respect. So with those final words, that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing my job. And I want to thank everybody involved, all the panelists, East meets West, you name it. And I know I'm not thanking everybody publicly, but they all know I'm right there with them, and we're here to support you. With that, Kelly, please take over. Thank you.
Hey, Chief, I do have a question from the audience in response to the hate incident, hate crime distinction. The question is when is it appropriate for someone to defend themselves, such as using a mace or pepper spray in response to a verbal threat?
Great question. To use an act of something physical like pepper spray, you have to be attacked or about to be attacked physically. If someone's is verbally assaulting you, the law doesn't allow you to physically respond with something like pepper spray, because that's a physical attack. It's a weapon. So you can't use a weapon if there is no weapon involved. There are those times where moving and leaving the location, get the information you can. What's the description of the person? Are they driving a vehicle? Can you get the license number? Able to take a quick photo of the vehicle? And then become the best witness possible and give us a call. Luckily for those people in San Marino, we have about a 1:39 response to a crime in progress here. It's not the same in other jurisdictions, but we're pretty special here. We also have a network of cameras that look for license plates, so that will help us. But you can't use some type of weapon, and OC spray is a weapon.
Okay, and then one final question, because you defined hate incident and you defined a crime in San Marino, at least. Would you want reporting of every hate incident rather than having to guess whether or not it's a crime or an incident?
Give us a call. If you're not sure, give us a call. It's the same way as when you see someone suspicious in your neighborhood. See something, say something. So let us know. And it's our responsibility to determine if it's a hate incident or a hate crime. When we do that, we call on experts within the district attorney's office. We may call on other agencies. We've talked to the FBI in the past to help us understand, in the State Department of Justice, to help us understand what we're doing to make sure that we're doing the right thing. As I said, there may be other crimes associated with this particular person, this particular group. And if we are able to provide that one link that is able to prosecute another crime somewhere else, that's even better. Or, as I said, there may be ways for us to provide for counseling, intervention, involvement with other agencies, nonprofit and government agencies, to help this person learn what the right way to do things are.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to now turn it over and introduce my co-moderator, the Vice President of East Meets West, Isaac Hahn.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Sorry, I was signing in a little bit late, so I missed the real introduction to Chief in Control. I just wanted to say a couple words about our Chief in Control. John has been involved, as he mentioned, with the city of San Marino in the last 6+ years. All I have seen for him is that he has been completely integrating and involved with all the community organizations. We really value his involvement because by being a member of the East Meets West Parent Education Club, as well as the City Club, Rotary Club, and the Chinese Club, he has truly paying back whatever that he has. And we benefited very much from our Chief in Control. So I wanted to, actually, I also post the introduction at the chat room. So if you wanted to read that, that'll be fine. Before we start the panelist, Kelly and I, we would like to, we have already ranked a number of 9 panelists, and each of them will share their thoughts and their topics for about 3 to 5 minutes. So in light of saving the time, I'm going to post all their introduction bio in the chat room, so you can read their background. Also for the those audience that needs a Chinese translation, we are also posting the link in the chat room. 所以你如果需要中文翻译的话呢，你可以到那个 chat 底下那个 chat 点击一下，我们有中文的翻译给您。So without any further delay, I would like to have Kelly to start our first panelist. Kelly?
Great. And our first panelist this afternoon is Claudia Bowles. Claudia, take it away.
My goodness, thank you so much. And Chief Incontro is such a hard act to follow. Thank you again for having me here. I'm really honored to actually be representing Partnership for Awareness today. I am one of the many community advisors for the nonprofit organization that's located here in San Marino. Just a little bit about me. I have 3 teenage children in the San Marino Unified School District. I'm a resident of San Marino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I work at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles in the emergency department as a crisis worker. I also have a small teletherapy practice, and I actually do have a few Asian clients. They're mostly second generation. I've actually referred a few out too to make sure that they get culturally competent care. And I will say that the few clients that I do have that are Asian have been tremendously triggered during the last several months during a lot of the social injustice we've been seeing. So I want to point out that the elephant in the room here, virtually in the virtual room, is that I'm not Asian, but I am human. I'm not an expert in this particular area. But I don't really understand exactly what everybody's been going through, but I really do want to listen and hear what everyone has to say. I myself come from a blended background. My paternal heritage is Jewish. I will say that as a child, I was incessantly teased for some of my physical features, one being my pale skin. And I will say that that has had a lifelong impact on my insecurity about my appearance. So it's just an example of what bullying can do. A quick overview of the fundamentals of mental health and wellness. First of all, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so very apropos to be here talking about this today. Mental health is extremely complicated, very complex, and very multifactorial. It's comprised of biological circumstances, and we each have our own, genetic predisposition, our temperaments, our personalities. It's also comprised of our life experiences and our environmental circumstances, our cultural influences. The main goal with mental health is to increase our protective factors and reduce our risk factors. And one of our main protective factors is our sense of resilience and our adaptability. And that can help us pull through these difficult times. So what does the psychological impact of trauma, bullying, and acts of hate look like? Well, it can vary tremendously. I mean, trauma can be one isolated incident, or it can be chronic, ongoing, daily, multiple incidents. We can also be the direct target of the trauma, or we can be a witness or a bystander experiencing secondary exposure to trauma. Just by hearing the stories and watching television or looking at the internet. So let's be particularly invested in looking at the signs of trauma. One could be hypervigilance, and that is checking our surroundings constantly, carrying pepper spray, as Chief brought up earlier, repetitive intrusive thoughts that can be all-consuming and debilitating, recurring nightmares, avoidance of situations that remind us of the trauma, like staying home from school just out of fear, feelings of helplessness, like I can't change the situation, depressed, irritable mood, and that can even lead to suicidal thoughts. Aggression, so suddenly we are now becoming the bullier. So when we're a target of violence, we can turn around and turn into the bullier as well. And that's both verbal and physical aggression. We can experience somatic complaints and physical complaints like headaches, abdominal pain, fatigue, a sense of shame and humiliation and low self-worth. Like maybe I don't really belong here after all. Also, we can self-isolate and withdraw from our friends and our loved ones. So how do we get help for the situation? How can we mitigate some of these negative mental health effects? Well, basic and fundamental, we can just reach out to our loved ones, our support system, our friends, our family, community organizations, faith-based organizations. We can also reach out to those who we see that are in pain and suffering and help them get help. We can practice self-care, mindfulness, positive coping skills. I personally love to go on walks. I love to light candles. I took a walk before this talk today. I have candles lit all around me here, and I love to write. Other folks like to journal, exercise, meditate, whatever works best for you. Okay, so we can also survey and screen our community and our students, and just identify how prevalent is the problem, how pervasive is it, and also identify those at risk and get them help. Advocacy and empowerment, well, that's what we're doing here right now, today. Systemic support, getting good policies and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion into our organizations, our schools, our workplaces. Reducing and limiting exposure to violence on television, on the internet, social media, finding that right balance. We could also donate to wonderful organizations that are doing impactful work. And finally, we can also get clinical professional support if needed, if things are becoming extreme. And I want to say that it's really important to have culturally competent care. Something important that I also want to bring up about mental health is societal stigma, because we know it exists, but it's getting better. We may naturally be concerned about being judged, and we don't want to be perceived as crazy. We don't always recognize that mental health involves real health concerns that deserve real solutions and real treatment. And just because some of the symptoms aren't visible doesn't mean they don't exist. Some of us think that mental health is just something to hide, or it's even sinful, or a sign of moral deficiency, or a sign of weakness. We may think, I don't want to sound like a total complainer, or if I pray hard enough, it'll just go away. Or if I bury my thoughts, they'll go away as well. Some communities, and even in the Asian community, are historically known to seek out mental health services less often, but this is changing. And an example of this is there are now abundant amount of resources out there, and I compiled a list of them and sent them over to East Meets West, and I hope you have access to them. A couple of things I want to point out is the National Suicide Prevention Line offers services in over 150 languages, and our Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health provides interpreter services. So if you're in crisis, you can call that 800 number and you will get services in your language. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. And you've just taken a big step in being part of the solution. Thank you so much.
Claudia, I have one question before we present our next presenter. You mentioned that there's resources available for someone in your family. How do you approach someone in your family who you know is suffering the consequences of, for example, a bias incident or a hate incident?
That's a really good question. If I saw somebody in my family that I knew was suffering, I would try to approach them sensitively, ask them questions, maybe just non-threatening, approach them and say, hey, I've noticed that you've been seeming a little bit sad lately, or you've been seeming a little bit on edge lately. And I'm wondering what's happening with you. Is there something that you've been experiencing or going through? And can we talk about this a little more? And I really do care about you a lot, and I'm here for you. If you want to talk about it, please talk to me. I'm here to listen. And if you need help, I'm going to find a way to get you help.
Awesome. Thank you, Claudia. And Isaac will introduce our next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Yang Chen, and Yang is Vice President of the San Marino Chinese Club this year, and I'm posting his short bio in the chat room. So here you have the platform, Yang. Go ahead.
Thank you, Isaac. So I'm here today, very happy to represent the Chinese Club of San Marino. Chinese Club of San Marino was established back in 1979 as a nonprofit organization in order to basically promote cultural exchange and appreciation of diversity, mainly for the Chinese-speaking community as new members within San Marino. Funny enough, like the mission of our club is even 40 years later extremely important. The role that we play and what we're trying to do. As you guys may know, we organize tons of events every year, educational programs and seminars. And a lot of it is to give the new language, Chinese language speaking community a chance to kind of assimilate better into the San Marino ecosystem. We also do the annual Mid-Autumn Festival fundraiser, which is our key. It's our key event every year. The money that we raise from that event allows us to be not only active participants within the community, but also be financial backers for certain events and organizations. Every year, the majority of the MAF profit, if you will, goes directly towards donations, and we donate usually 100% of that money right back into the community. So we've helped all the different schools from elementary to middle and also the high school and various organizations throughout the community. So, you know, we're very active. If you guys would have read in the Outlook, I think it was April 1st edition, we, you know, due to the whole crisis at the school, we donated $200,000 to the San Marino Schools Foundation. That was an effort, a combination of the Chinese Club and also one of our very generous members. So those are some of the contributions that we make. We also frequently donate to police and fire department, as you know, Chief Encontro and Chief Rueda are always big supporters of us. So we always want to give back as well. So, you know, our whole thing is we feel like, you know, everything that we do in the community is for the community. And, you know, getting that kind of reception back is where I think a lot of the magic happens. And events like this, where we really have the champions of the city together, kind of one voice, expressing the same thing, talking about the same thing, expressing the same concerns and issues is a very good first step for us to start to, you know, I guess, if you will, begin the healing process. As far as myself is concerned, I have a junior at San Marino High. He's been in the San Marino school system since elementary school. I think this whole thing with, you know, the AAPI hate is, you know, affected everyone, obviously, and we're all very sad to see that it's happening. But I don't necessarily feel like it's something that has just started. It's something that's always been there, and you know, maybe you know, the AAPI community was somewhat exempt to it for many years, but doesn't mean that the issues weren't there all along. I guess for myself, I'm not an expert, but on the panels you guys see, we have an amazing lineup of experts in all the different various fields. I myself, I'm an American-born Taiwanese, so you know, when statements are said like "go back to your country," things like that, those kind of confuse me. Being an American, you know, I've always been this way, and so that's kind of where my experiences are. And I feel like in this whole process, there's always the pre-incident, the incident itself, and then the post-incident. So based on the various backgrounds of where you are and, you know, what kind of experiences and things that have happened to you, I feel like, you know, there's kind of those three phases. So, you know, the more we talk about it, whether it be, you know, arming our kids with the knowledge ahead of time, getting them ready for what they may face in the future, or even the, you know, the aftermath of the incident and the healing process. I think those are all, you know, different stages that people may experience in this whole thing. But I think the main thing is as long as the communication is there, letting the different, you know, people within the community understand each other more. I think that's where it all begins. So definitely events like this are very important. And I speak for the Chinese Club when I say that we're always willing and ready anytime we're needed to, you know, help, I don't know, assemble the Chinese community, or anytime there's an event like this, we're always game to help out. Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks. I've just got one question for you. As a parent, how have you communicated to your child about confronting bias and hate that they face at school?
Sure. So again, I'm not an expert in this field at all. I'm just, you know, I just go by my own experience. But as I mentioned, I was born in the U.S. I was born in actually Minneapolis. So I lived there for 12 years. Being the only Asian face in my school, other than my sister, because it was her and I, being the only Asian face in the school, I feel like, you know, I've experienced a lot. I've gone through a lot, and I've pretty much seen it all when when you talk about hate incidents. I don't know about crime, but definitely incidents. And looking back now, I'm starting to realize that everything I was experiencing, a lot of that can be classified as a microaggression. So that's when, you know, kids don't know, right? Kids kind of say whatever they say. They don't even know what they're really saying. So, I mean, hearing those things, I actually didn't know that that was directed towards me until I came to California, because I didn't know what that was. So, one train of thought is like, ignorance is bliss. The other side is, for myself as a parent, for my son, he was born and raised in Los Angeles, kind of grew up in a very multicultural environment. And for him, I always kind of break it down. I mean, I'm very close with my son, so we kind of talk like friends. So I basically sat him down, and it wasn't just now recently. I mean, throughout his whole childhood, I've always been open with him about a lot of issues. And I kind of broke it down to him, like basically everything that happened to me and, what that was and why that was. And, I feel that a lot of it is not necessarily rooted from anything negative. It's just rooted from not knowing. As you get older, it's actually ignorance, right? Because as you get older, you should know better. But kids don't really know. So, a lot of it is talking to your friends and figuring out like, hey, do you guys know what you're saying? And that's offensive to me. So I don't know if you guys have ever met my son, Damien, at the high school, but he's a very open kid. He chats about everything. Doesn't matter with kids or adults. He's a very open and inquisitive, and he's very always happy to share and express his thoughts. So that's kind of my parenting style, and I feel like for us anyways it's worked. And again, I don't know if that's the best way, but it's kind of our way, and so far so good, I feel.
Great. Thank you, Young, for sharing, because I think it's important for people to hear different methods and ways of dealing with an issue that, we all confront on a daily basis. So I thank you for being here today. At this point, it's now my pleasure to introduce a friend of mine and a trustee at PCC, and here representing the Rotary Club, Linda Waugh.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you to the East Meets West for hosting this. I'm so pleased to see so many of our community members on this call. And I want to thank Chief Incontro for actually spurring or initiating this discussion. So as Kelly said, I am a Rotarian. And one of the things I said to Rotary when they asked me to join was, as long as I can focus on education issues. So as you see in my biography, that is what I've done. I am not only a PCC trustee, but I also serve on the statewide board for trustees and now the National Association for Trustees. And as you can see from the background that I have, my virtual background, this is DEI Awareness Month, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So we in community colleges are very, very focused on eliminating bias and hate and really closing that equity gap throughout our education system. So there are a few questions that were posed to us to address, and how have you experienced bias? What can we do in schools? How do we address hate? And then how do we move beyond it? So those are the things I want to focus on. And as the chief has said, there's a difference between incidents and outright assaults. Many of us don't report these incidents because it seems like it's just better to ignore them. We don't want to escalate them. These are microaggressions. We chalk it up to ignorance. And sometimes we're just so shocked that we can't even respond. So some of the most common incidents, I'm sure many of us have heard these or experienced them firsthand or heard of others. Let's go back to where you came from. How did you learn to speak English so well? I've heard neighbors go out to other neighbors to say, don't sell your house to Chinese because we don't want to live in Chinatown. And one of the most recent incidents that happened in a college, not our college, but it was publicized in the newspaper, was a professor said to a student, why don't you anglicize your name so it's easier for the rest of us to pronounce, because your name sounds offensive to me in my language. So these are pretty offensive remarks and do constitute sort of a disregard for APIs. So at PCC and many of our colleges, we create safe spaces for both our employees and our students to be able to talk about their experiences. And they can talk without any repercussions of judgment or admonishment of what is said. Everyone is just given that space and being respected in what they have to say. As you can see from my biography, I'm also on the LA County 211 board. And one of the things we are focused on is collecting information on all incidents so that we can collaborate with all organizations to help our communities. And so we want to aggregate all of the reporting. So I'm really pleased that Chief Incontro was accepting all incidents, but many of our communities don't want to report a name calling incident, but we do need to record that so that we can address these issues. One of the other things that I have been promoting since these the anti-API hate has been so prominent has been the Hollaback bystander training. And this is training that helps us understand how do we respond when these incidents occur. So I encourage all of you to take that. I did submit it as one of the resources. So we do need to aggregate these reporting so that there's accurate reporting, recent incidents, or if an Asian business is vandalized, is it reported as a hate crime? Often not, it's just reported as a vandalization crime. But we do need to look at these incidents so that we can accurately report them. And we should not allow ourselves to be silenced by those who feel uncomfortable by what we have to say or feel we are being too sensitive to remarks. So in higher ed, we are working on looking at everything from diversity and equity. And so one of the things we have is a legislative bill that's being sponsored by Assemblymember Marisucci, and that is advocating ethnic studies. And this coincides with the mandate for the CSUs and their graduation requirements. And we hope to help the K-12s. We think that creating a better understanding of each other's ethnic heritage will also help us all create a respect for each other's, where we come from and our backgrounds. So thank you for inviting me to this, and I look forward to hearing my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and taking the leadership in the educational community, helping the students and parents to cope with current issues. So we appreciate you being here and sharing that. So our fourth panelist, we're very grateful, actually. Amber Fong is from San Marino High School as a senior. So having our high school students involved with this, I think is very important and very valuable. And you have the courage to share your experience. We appreciate that, Amber. So go ahead, Amber.
Yes, of course. And I'm really honored that I was invited to speak today. So to begin, around a year ago during this time when quarantine had just started, my mom went to a local supermarket to buy groceries. And when she was unloading her bags into her trunk and then opening the door of the car, the lady in the car next to her rolled down her window and started randomly screaming at my mom and saying that she dented her car by opening the door. So my mom was completely caught off guard and she apologized, and she definitely didn't hit the door, but she still said sorry. But instead of accepting the apology and considering that nothing had even happened, the other woman continued to scream racist profanities at my mother for an offense that she did not commit, yelling that my mom should screw off and go back to her own country. And she even accused my mom of bringing coronavirus to America. So the sad truth is that this woman had no idea the struggles that my mom went through to be in this country, the struggles that she went through to be in America, to be in what's considered the land of opportunity, even to be here in San Marino, where my family lives today. The struggles of a young immigrant who escaped a communist country and came here by boat when she was only 18, and the struggles of trying to support her parents and 5 siblings in a new country when she was working multiple jobs as a full-time student. The struggles that she had to go through to have a roof over her head, to afford a car, to have meals, and to be here in America. But with that woman's insensitive comments, my mom told me that she felt unwelcome, as though all of her accomplishments and hard work were worth nothing, because according to that lady in the Jeep in the parking lot of some random supermarket, America isn't my mom's home. So hearing this pain verbally expressed from a loved one opened my eyes to a world of discrimination and anti-Asian sentiment, a world that had always been tucked away and hidden from the general public way before Chinese hate from coronavirus even began. This world horrified me. Its repetitive culture of belittling others based on their accents, food, or cultural traditions. And the part that truly shook me to the core was the fact that this culture had found its way into my own school. So during May of 2020, one of my friends who also attended San Marino High School sent me a TikTok or a video from social media of a current sophomore at San Marino High School that was blatantly anti-Asian, saying that Chinese people were disgusting and they ate bats that had coronavirus for every single one of their meals. I was obviously horrified. I had heard that there were some people out there who actually believed that the virus originated from Chinese people, but I was so surprised to find out that one of these people actually went to my own school, a school where over half the population is Asian American. I immediately felt uneasy and unsafe, like I could be targeted at school just because of my skin color. So to combat this, my friend and I wrote a chain email that we ended up forwarding to nearly every upperclassman to send to our principal and vice principal, demanding accountability. And sure enough, a couple days later, the sophomore who posted the video messaged me with the most cookie cutter copy and paste apology that I had ever heard. I remember texting him back and saying that his apology was clearly fake, and hoping that he could find some remnant of human decency within his soul to truly mean what he said and understand the consequences of his actions. So with that experience, I discovered another terrible and shocking aspect of the hidden world of anti-Asian sentiment: continuous patterns of complicity and turning a blind eye to microaggressions. I remember under that guy's TikTok that a ton of his friends commented, laughing, rooting him on for his racism. I was so confused because I saw that some of the people that commented were actually Chinese people. And I remember thinking, do you not have respect for yourself? Do you not have respect for your family? Do you not have respect for your culture? How are you not ashamed of yourself? But after some reflection, I realized that their complicity may have stemmed from fear. Fear of being the odd one out, the one who ruins the joke, and the one who makes it awkward. And sadly enough, I've actually felt this fear once. I remember right during the fall of my junior year, I got a haircut right below my shoulders when school was still in person. And one of my friends who was Caucasian told me that my haircut looked really Asian. And I was completely caught off guard by that comment because, first of all, I'm Asian. So how do you have an Asian haircut? And how can the most basic haircut on earth even be related to being Asian? And second of all, why is looking Asian a bad thing? I'm proud of who I am and how I look. And again, I literally just cut my hair. And I remember uncomfortably laughing and trying to quickly change the subject because I didn't know how to react, and I was still trying to process what her question even meant in the first place. And if I had the chance to redo that small 1-minute conversation with the microaggression that I now realize was there, I would have reacted completely different now. Now that I'm more educated on how to respond and explain that her comment was offensive. I think that in order to catalyze change, we must educate others to not only stand up against racism, but also to be actively anti-racist. Just because you can sit on the sidelines and not join in when someone is being discriminated against doesn't mean that you're solving the problem. Instead, you're worsening it. This culture of complicity has to be addressed, and I think that what this panel is aiming to do will really help improve the situation within our community. And thank you for listening to me speak, and I really hope my message comes across to all of you.
I think it does, Amber. I do have a question for you, though, where you now, I think, understand what microaggressions are. How do you confront your friends when they engage in similar types of microaggressions, whether it be amongst people of your own background or other races?
I actually talked about this with Miss El-Hendi the other day, but I think a key factor of confronting those microaggressions is just being straightforward and calling them out on it, because what encourages them to continue being racist and discriminating other people is that the people around them don't say anything and they just let it happen. So I just try to be straightforward and call them out and say, hey, this isn't okay, and you can't say that. That's offensive.
Are you finding that's having an impact on your friends, that they're starting to understand the power of confronting microaggressions?
Yes, definitely. And most of my friends, or all of my friends, understand what it means to be respectful of other people's cultures, but there are some people at school that still have to do some work.
As do we all, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your powerful statement. And because Ms. El-Hendi, I'd like to introduce now Tanya El-Hendi.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, Amber, for having the bravery to speak. And I reached out to Amber because she has just demonstrated leadership through the time that I've known her at San Marino High School. So I think Amber is such an awesome example, not only because she's willing to speak up and confront some of the challenges that we're seeing on campus, but the reality is we need to talk about it. And so, you know, a lot of things have been happening in the news that have really brought attention. And in San Marino in particular, we need to stand up for our community. And I see that in the school setting. And so we can't avoid the obvious. I'm very, very white, but I hear the stories of students, and I understand that we all need to take a step back, reflect on our implicit bias that we just have, and we have to recognize our privilege regardless of where we've come from, whether it's because of the color of our skin, whether it's because of our income, or it's because of some other factor, but we have to be aware of it. And what's most important in schools is we have a responsibility to be responsive when students speak up and say something. We have that responsibility to hear and not dismiss. And as the adults, we have to talk about how are we going to address this issue. And one of the most important things, and it was brought up by Linda Waugh, it was mentioned a bit by Chief Encontro and by Amber, it's really how are we going to say, hey, it's not okay. That we're not going to turn our head when we hear those microaggressions. When us as adults and we're walking through the hall and we hear something, that's not okay. And so what we really want to do is empower our students and have conversations, that these uncomfortable conversations, but that we're going to hear and we're going to recognize everyone's experience. So I think that that's critical. And as I shared, I'm the wellness counselor at San Marino, and I work with the high school students. And being an adolescent, it's so easy to be dismissed by adults for whatever reason. When adolescents are upset because of a breakup or a disappointment in a grade. And it's so easy as adults to not recognize the weight, the magnitude of how it felt for that student. And so especially so when we're talking about issues of cultural and anti-racism, that we're responsive, that we understand, and we don't necessarily have to have walked in those shoes to create an open space for conversation, to have compassion and to hear and to say, what are we going to do? And so as a clinician, I think about like empathy, for example, is putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Compassion, on the other hand, is what are we going to do to take action? How are we going to work alongside of our community and our students who are being harmed or who are hurt in some way? And that's really what the focus is on. And so we're looking at how do we get some additional training. We've had a lot of wonderful training for our staff this year on implicit bias. I think it was really helpful. I do look forward to the opportunity next year where we can see some of our teachers put it into action, because it is very different when you're face to face with students versus being online. And so we've kind of lost that ability to kind of have some of these really uncomfortable conversations and invite students to have them with us because of the distance. And so it's so important that right now, I really appreciate East Meets West and Annie and all of the effort to put this on so we can start those uncomfortable conversations now. So when we return to campus in person, we can actually talk about it face to face, because we have to empower our students to speak up, just like Amber had shared, and say, you know what, that was offensive, that was hurtful. And we have to encourage the students who are uncomfortable by it to all walk away. And when we look at all of the evidence-based bullying anti-bullying training that's been out for years, it's focusing on that bystander. Is how do we convey that it is not okay the way we talk to each other as adolescents, the way we discourage, the way we self-disparage ourselves. And so we really need to have those conversations of how we can just, in groups decide, I'm not going to stand around and listen to this. I don't think it's funny. And you don't even have to be tactful. You don't have to be aggressive, but just to acknowledge, address, that was mean, that was rude, and just walk. And so if we all start doing that, then what happens is we convey to the other kids that we're not going to tolerate. We're not going to tolerate those little microaggressions or those sarcastic comments, which are only meant to be hurtful. And so it's so important that we just bring up the conversation. I'm not an expert in this area, but I am an expert in listening. And I'm also an expert in what do we need to do to address it and how do we create a welcome space. And I think it's so important to have it in our schools, to have it with our kids starting young. And then also then how do we bring it back to the community and have a real, honest, authentic dialogue, because it is a community issue. It's not for one group of people, it's for all of us. How are we going to move forward and embrace? And how are we going to hear the struggle and the hardship and what's happened? And it's so critical, and we really want to do that in the school setting. So again, I commend Amber for coming and sharing, because I know that that's very difficult. And I could have probably emailed half the student population, and they would have stepped up and said, I have a situation, I have a story, I have an experience. And we need to start addressing that immediately in order for us to move forward.
Thanks, Tanya. I do have one question for you.
Sure.
And it's kind of a little left turn, I think, but it's hinted at in your presentation and Amber's presentation. Are there any roadblocks systemically in the school system itself that interfere with you and the students confronting microaggressions and biased behavior?
I think that's a great question. And as far as systemic roadblocks, I think it's the culture of how we've always done things. It is easier to dismiss an uncomfortable conversation than to have it. And I think the most important thing in working with adults and working with kids, like the most important thing is just to say, you know what, I don't know, educate me. So I think that is the biggest roadblock, is to really get people on board with just saying, I don't know. I'm sorry that made you uncomfortable. Tell me why, explain to me. So we really need to turn to some of our students and even our staff, and say, listen to their expertise and create a space for that. But I think the main barrier is no one likes to have uncomfortable conversations, right? And so there's a lot of people who like to avoid confrontation, avoid putting someone on the spot or making someone else feel bad. And we really need to set all of that aside and just say, you know what, we're going to have these uncomfortable conversations. We're going to have it together. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to stumble, but I also know I can learn from students and I can learn from staff from their experiences. And I think we will just grow as a community if we just say, you know what, let's have the conversation with compassion. What are we going to do to address it? And then also acknowledge our contribution, whether it's intentional or unintentional, but that we're willing to learn together as a group. Because I think any student, if they were able to say to a teacher or to a staff member that they felt put off by a comment or something that happened, if that teacher could be like, oh my goodness, tell me, educate me, because that was not the intention. So in my field as a clinician and working in education for 20 years, I approach everyone with good intentions, that when situations happen, I would say 99.9% of the time, it's unintentional hurt, or it wasn't meant to come across that way. And I think it's really important to take a step back and say, let's have that conversation, because I should be able as an adult or as an adolescent step into a space and say, this is making me uncomfortable. Can we discuss it? And I think it's the adult's responsibility to rise to the occasion and stand up for that and say, yes, we can. As an adult, I'm willing to be vulnerable to hear what you have to say to support you.
Excellent. Thank you. And Isaac, next speaker.
Thank you, Tanya. We're very grateful to have crosstown collaboration from Connie Liao. Connie is a current president of the Arcadia Chinese Club. And Connie, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Connie Liao, the president of Arcadia Chinese Association. It's a great honor to speak at this event on behalf of ACA. Since COVID-19 pandemic, Asian hate crimes have increased dramatically. Asian Americans have become a scapegoat for the virus pandemic. To change this situation, we need to speak out and tell the community that Asian Americans have been consistently, diligently, and conscientiously contributing to the community and the country. In the last year alone, the Arcadia Chinese Association raised $35,000 for the renovation of the Boy Scout camp. Last April, when the supply of PPE was extremely short at the beginning of the pandemic, ACA donated $42,000 worth of PPE to 5 hospitals, 4 elder care centers, police department, and fire stations in Arcadia and San Gabriel Valley area. ACA also donated $6,000 to Arcadia High School and nonprofit organizations, sent a $10,000 check to the Arcadia Firefighters Association for extinguishing the Bobcat wildfires, and delivered thank you lunches to firefighters on the front line many times, provided thank you lunches for 65 COVID-19 vaccine staff in 4 straight series. Last April, when I delivered the PPE to Kaiser Permanente at Baldwin Park, the person who received the PPE told me that Kaiser received PPE donations 3 to 4 times every day. Among them, 95% were from the Asian American organizations. Last week, I participated in an event organized by PPE Unite to distribute 1.5 million pieces of PPE for free to 900 small businesses. These 1 million pieces of PPE were donated by a Chinese American entrepreneur, Jay Cao, who also participated in the distribution event on the same day. However, although Asian Americans have been contributing to the communities fighting against the virus, we rarely see these touching stories reported by mainstream media. On the contrary, we heard destructive words such as Chinese virus, Gong flu, which have severely damaged the image and the reputation of Asian Americans and triggered more hate crimes against the Asians. To prevent any further misdirected hatred toward Asians and stop the occurrence of hate crimes, we must take actions immediately to reshape the social image and the reputation of Asian Americans. As we all know, Asian Americans have made many notable contributions to the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, such as Zheng Daoli, Zhen Ning Yang, Samuel, Zhao Zhongding, and Stephen Chu, etc., who won Nobel Prizes, and famous architect Liu Mingpei. Many Asian Americans are also entrepreneurs and industry leaders who have shaped America and have profound impact on American daily life, such as Sudha Pichai, CEO of Google, Eric Yuan, founder and CEO of Zoom, Steve Chen, co-founder and ex-CEO of YouTube, Jason Huang, co-founder and CEO of NVIDIA, Jerry Yang, co-founder and ex-CEO of Yahoo. The list goes on. Can you imagine without Google, without Zoom, without YouTube, what's going to happen for your daily life in the pandemic period? Asian Americans have also made brilliant achievement in the arts, like film director Ang Lee and Cleo Zhao. Both won the Best Director at the Golden Globe and the Academy Awards. Almost all of them mentioned above are Asian immigrants who left their hometown to pursue the American dream. Behind their success, their stories full of hardships and frustrations, hopes and persistence. There would be very interesting story materials for movies, TV series, newspapers, and magazines. I hope that the new news media would have more reports on the hardworking, successful Asian Americans. And I also hope that the Asian Americans will continue to let our voice be heard and speak out against hate crime, and make it known to Americans that Asian Americans have profound influence and contributions to the development and the prosperity of this country, It is completely wrong for Asian Americans to be the target of the hate crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. And noting that it is AAPI Heritage Month, May is federally recognized. I have one question for you. How do we model acceptable behavior in confronting racism bias?
I agree what police chief said. We get to know each other and be friends of each other. The United States is a multiple ethnic, multiple lingual, and multiple religious and multiple cultural country of immigrants. Every ethnic, language, religion, and culture are an integral part of the America's culture with their characteristics and advantages, and deserve to be in depth studied and respected. We came to this country in addition to maintaining our traditions. We should also diligently to absorb the values of America, democracy, and freedom, American laws and rules, and culture and protocol. Acadia Chinese Association has held 3 lectures and 2 virtual galas since last October, including the presidential election and California position, and the updates of COVID-19 virus and the vaccines, the updates of tax laws, business laws, immigration laws, and hate crime laws. We believe these educational lectures would help Asians understand the laws and rules and integrate into the community smoothly and quickly. And the virtual galas that demonstrate Asian performing arts would also let the mainframe understand our cultures and the traditions well. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Thanks for being with us. And at this time, it's my great pleasure to introduce the president of the East West Parent Education Club again, Sophia Chan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And when I first came to the United States in junior high, during lunchtime, a group of Hispanic girls waved me over. I don't speak a word of English. They were laughing really loud, and I would just smile back politely. And they did that 3 days straight. 3 days later, one of the girls, not that group, waved me over and said in broken Chinese, "Don't sit with them. They're all laughing at you because you don't speak English." At that moment, I told myself, I'm going to learn English. I stayed up every day past midnight to learn English, to learn all the schoolwork. When I finished the semester, I finished with straight A's. That group of Hispanic girls did not dare to laugh at me again because all of a sudden they realized I could speak English in a few weeks. When I was in high school, I was in this class, I was a teacher's pet. There were 3 students that were extra mean to me. I would frown with all the mean things they say to me, but I don't really engage. They were 3 Caucasian people, and the prettiest girl was the meanest to me. I sit in the front of the class, and one day I could feel something in the back of my head, but I didn't know what it was, and I was paying attention to the teacher's lessons. When I got home, that's when I realized behind my hair were all bubble gums. And there was no way for me to get rid of it. So I had to cut off a lot of my hair. I was very upset. The next day, I told 3 of them I was reporting them to the principal. After I did that, their open bullying toward me stopped. I'm not saying there is a solution to every discrimination or bullying behaviors out there, but sometimes there are. But what if there aren't really yet? Sometimes the mindset can be helpful. There is this really popular game called Fortnite, played by many teenagers. And the goal of the game is to not get killed. But if you do get killed, you can now spectate the person that kills you. So now you're seeing it from the killer's perspective. And now from that vantage point, you will find yourself sometimes even rooting for the winning of that killer that just killed you. So sometimes placing ourselves in the shoes of others can also be helpful. Again, none of that may mean that there is a solution, either psychologically or physically. But here's something that's very encouraging. There's this famous phrase that says, you don't drown by falling into the river. You drown by being submerged in it. Life has a lot of hurt, discriminations, hate crimes, microaggressions. We need to make a choice. We need to choose not to be submerged, and we need to rise above to the water. Otherwise, we will become the permanent victim. 所以那个时候我刚来美国初中，然后呢，有一群西班牙女孩子，她们就说：“哎，过来吃饭。”那个时候我也听不懂她们讲什么，她们就大笑，然后我就陪着笑，我也不知道她们在说什么。过了3天以后，有一个同学，不是他们那一组的，就叫我过来说，用不是很好的中文，但是我听得懂。他说：“你不要跟他们做，他们全都在笑你，你一点英文都听不懂。”我那个时候就发誓，我一定得把英文学好。我每一天学习到过午夜12点。我那个学期得了全 A。那一群墨西哥女生也不敢再笑我，因为他们发觉，哎，我竟然会讲英文。然后在高中的时候，我有一堂课上得很好，然后有3个学生对我特别的凶，他们全部是金发男眼的。最漂亮的女生对我特别的凶，我不喜欢他们跟我讲话，但是我也没有去跟他们说什么，我就是一直皱着眉头，他们凶我的时候。结果有一次呢，我就是坐在这个教室的前面，然后我就突然感觉到后面好像头发有什么东西，但我不是很清楚，我也没去注意。回到家了以后，我才知道原来他们在我的头发那边丢了好多的口香糖，我头发整个被粘住了，没有办法，只好把这些头发剪掉了很多很多。我第2天我跟他们说我要去报告给校长，之后呢，他们也就不敢再公开的欺负我了。我不是说每一个歧视的事件都会有一个解决的方式，所以有时候我们可能要改变自己的心态，我们得站在对方的这个立场去想，因为有时候那个是帮助我们解决我们自己内心的结。有一句有名的话，他说：“你淹水不是因为你掉到河里头，而是因为你沉在那个水里。”所以不管我们受什么伤，不管我们受了什么冤，我们要记得，我们一定得浮上来，要不然的话，我们就永远是那位受害者。Thank you.
And I think
Sophia.
What is unfortunate is that what we're seeing is that discrimination and bias is multi-generational. And thank you for your powerful words and story. I think that goes a long way, I think, to putting into frame for all of us who've witnessed this over the past, well, a long time in my case. Thanks again. Go ahead, Isaac.
Sophia, do you have any practical advice to the parents of the how to guide and teach our children confronting the bias and the hate situation?
Yes, so from my personal experience, if it's indeed something that I could self-improve, such as my English, to dissolve the discrimination, why not, right? Self-improvement. But many a times it does take up to escalating it to a higher authority level when that is available. Because the bullying that I got was constant. And even though they knew I didn't like it, because I would frown at them, I would nicely say, just don't do that, right? It didn't work. So that required escalation. So reporting and using the authorities that can help you is very important. And I really appreciate what Tanya said earlier. It's okay not to be just nice. We're so caught up, and especially I think in the Chinese culture, to always be very polite, and everything is very polite. But it's okay not to be very polite when you are the person that's being hurt. Tell them this is not right, and have that uncomfortable conversation. Again, it's hard to be able to express all that hurt openly. Sometimes it takes months. It took me years to even say what I say right now. But we need to be sensitive, and as parents, noticing the exterior types of behaviors. Child becomes more quiet, or child becomes like what one of the speakers said earlier, more aggressive. You know, what's going on? And just say, we're here for you. Is there something that we can help with?
Thank you, Sophia. So our next panelist is from Arcadia, Paul Chan. Paul is Mayor Pro Tem of the city of Arcadia, and certainly Paul is not shy or timid about speaking out. So here is Paul Chan.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, just speaking at San Marino, a sister city with the city of Arcadia. I was invited today actually to speak about a unique topic, and that is the topic of race, racism, and politics in running as a candidate in the city of Arcadia. During COVID, there's been a lot of energies that have occurred, from frustration, from anger, even hate. We've seen a lot of that. But I think I have a very unique perspective. I remember when I was running in the city, someone invited me to their home, and I went into their home, and she was just a very beautiful, kind lady. And she told me how she had 2 grandchildren, and her grandchildren were not invited to any of the parties of any of the students. And, I was kind of sad. I was very disappointed in hearing that. She was a very, very nice lady. And subsequently, she explained to me that her own neighbor, someone went over to her and said, you shouldn't live in our neighborhood. You should move out. You don't belong here. These are the statements that are being heard, and it hurts you. Everybody that hears this feels very sad. But the person that I visited was Caucasian. She was not Asian. And so the reason why I share that with you is because of the fact that in many ways, particularly during COVID, and particularly during a lot of movements that we've seen, and recently with the API movement, is that there is a desire to focus on your differences and to have others respect your differences. But I believe it's totally different. I believe that what we should be doing is focusing on what makes us together, what we love, because 99% of every person are really the same. We love our parents, we love our children, we care about our home prices, we worry about crime. And so that is the message that I would have. I'm very proud of Connie Liao over at the Arcadia Chinese Club. During COVID, when we didn't have any more PPE, when my own hospital was mere days away from closing because we didn't have the COVID wing, because we didn't have any PPE, individuals like Connie stepped up. She didn't step up saying, I'm Chinese. She didn't step up saying, you must know that us Chinese are helping. But what she did is she came forward. A lot of people have been wondering, about the API, API hate has been going on forever. Every Asian American has had a story about being called a chink and going back to China. If you were to drop me off in China, I wouldn't know where to go. I mean, every one of us have had that story. And I oftentimes wonder why 2021? What made 2021 so interesting that people suddenly began to care? Well, I can be able to tell you why. Because the Asian American community that have sat on the sidelines for many years, when they could have jumped in to fully help, decided to jump in when America was in its greatest need. Because when people were dying, when people couldn't leave their homes, the Asian American community came forward in mass to give PPE, to help out with vaccinations, to serve our first responders. In Arcadia for 60 days straight, we fed our first responders, and 90% of the free meals every single day over 60 days came from the API community. So that is what I would encourage you to do. That is my message for today. That if you really want to invigorate the API community and to have them stand up and be proud as Americans. What we must encourage the API community to do, apart from saying that you need to respect us because of our uniqueness, is to be able to say that we are better together. We're stronger together. And if we can be able to focus on what everybody loves, I can be able to say that our community will be better. So thank you very much. I don't know if you want me to translate that into Mandarin, into Mandarin, but that would be what I share today.
We have simultaneous translation going on today.
Okay.
So we're doing great. But I do have a question for you.
Yep.
How did you personally decide to come off the sidelines and get involved in bringing people together, or were you always involved?
Well, you know, I think as an elected official, one of the things that you begin to realize is that you really do need to serve. You know, you sit there at night, you aren't able to sleep. You know, when you first become an elected official, they basically give you a book. They say, this is the intro of the city. Here's some finances. We're going to do a lecture with you. It'll be 1 to 3 hours. We'll introduce you to some department heads and go knock yourself out. And you're pretty worried. You know, you're very scared. And suddenly it begins to dawn on you that you're not representing yourself. You're representing 60,000 unique individuals with their own perspectives and their own lives. And so what I began thinking was, you know, how am I going to represent everybody, right? With everybody having different thoughts. And yes, some people's thoughts aren't thoughts that I agree with. Some of them are racial, it is true. But yet the story that I gave is a person who has that experience where she, as a multi-generational, she's lived in Arcadia for 70 years, is being pushed out of her own city. I began realizing that it's not about race. I began realizing it's about focusing on community and what brings us together. And that is really, I think, the immigrant mentality, you know, whether you're Irish or Polish or any nationality or race that comes over to America, there is a kind of an immigrant period that you need to go through. And in many ways, the Asian American community, because we've been very successful, we have not needed to integrate as easily as other races. And because of that, I think that the Asian American community in some ways has sat on the sidelines when we really could have jumped in. But I'm not sure what it is, but you know what? I'm not upset about not doing it. But in 2020 through 2021, you speak to any hospital, any city, any elected official throughout Southern California, and they've said, oh my God, I don't know what happened. The flood of support, the flood of caring, the flood of the API community giving back through PPE and volunteering has been overwhelming. I mean, it's to the point now, you know, somebody wants to donate 50 pallets of hand sanitizers to our city. It's an immense amount. We don't even know where to put it. We're calling up other cities and we're saying, hey, can we be able to serve you? Can we be able to give? That is what I think the API community needs to do. Yes, we must respect people that have come before us. Yes, the anger and the hate, we should recognize and we should deal with. But yes, we must also understand that the same people that are angry in many ways are hurting from COVID. And what we need to do is we need to serve, we need to give back even more. And I think in giving out love, love will be returned. And that is what I recommend.
Awesome. I think that's an excellent and positive message for us to bring this panel to a conclusion. I've got one more speaker for you, and we're very pleased to have today Robin Toma. Take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. And I want to thank East Meets West for really putting together a wonderful panel of speakers with incredibly insightful perspectives. As was mentioned, my name is Robin Toma. I'm Executive Director of the County's Human Relations Commission. And I'm here because I wanted to share with you all resources and really a change of thinking that, that we're trying to promote to deal with the rise in hate. And, just a little bit of background on the commission. So our agency's been a part of LA County government for many years. We work to transform prejudice into acceptance, inequity into justice, and hostility into peace. And led by the Board of Supervisors, whose chair is Supervisor Hilda Solis, who's been a real champion of our work. We've been able to really put forward, I think, a groundbreaking new program. And I also want to mention that the supervisor that represents San Marino and Arcadia, Supervisor Catherine Barger, has also been a strong supporter of our anti-hate work. And I want to recognize that. Let me just say a little bit about my own life experience that's linked to the goals of our commission. My mother and her family, my aunts and uncles and grandparents, they were among the over 120,000 Japanese Americans who were forced into US government-run prison camps after the bombing of Pearl Harbor during World War II. And my passion for this work and human relations unquestionably comes from having had such a massive violation of human rights happen to my own family. But it's also from the amazing resilience that I saw in my mother and her parents and their family as they made their way into becoming healthy and evolved adults and parents after the war. And I'm very proud that I was able to win some justice for over 2,200 Japanese Latin Americans who are even in many ways worse off than my mother's situation, living in their own countries in Latin America, taken from their countries, imprisoned by the US, and used by the US government for prisoner exchange with Japan during World War II. The fact that we got some part of justice of that is the kind that I remember is possible in this country that I'm grateful for, and reminds me that we don't have to be silent, or we can overcome the worst kinds of injustices that are happening to us. And of course, that brings me to today. There's no question, as speakers have said, and we all know, we're in a very unique period in some ways, experiencing this rise in violence targeting Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in this country. As other speakers have mentioned, this is not new. There has been anti-Asian prejudice and violence throughout this country's history. And I think we're at the celebration of 150 years of the Chinese massacre that happened in Los Angeles, where over 10% of the entire Chinese population at the time was killed through lynching and attacks and violence. But I know that the way it's happening now is that so many people understandably fear what is happening and are worried about what's going on. Where is this going? Is this going to end? We know that Asian-owned businesses have closed in substantial percentages. That reflects the fear and prejudice that people have against Asians that pre-exists all of this, but it was certainly fueled by the pandemic and what some of the political leadership has said about it. So it's in this backdrop that the LA County Board of Supervisors and the Commission on Human Relations, we put together a program called LA versus Hate. And this program is unique because, as was mentioned, we've had laws against hate crimes, and some police departments will collect reports of hate incidents. But as many speakers have acknowledged, and I myself will say the same, we've all experienced acts of hate that may or may not rise to the level of a hate crime, but are no less traumatic, no less harmful, no less damaging to our sense of well-being, our sense of belonging in our communities. So we decided that that is something that we have to do something about, that is a whole universe of acts of hate and discrimination and hostility that cannot go unchecked, that the normalization of that kind of behavior that has been so long a part of our society has to change. And one of the ways that it has to change is, first of all, people need to simply report, because unless we don't know about what's happening, we as a community, as a larger community, can't do anything about it. I wanted to share my screen so that I can show you a little bit what I'm talking about in this new program. Let's see if I can get the cooperation of my, okay. All right. So I wanted to say that that change in culture is really a huge one, because not only do a lot of people feel, particularly immigrants who are targeted, may not feel comfortable going to authorities, but even folks who are born in this country oftentimes just deal with the acts of hate and hostility by simply saying, you know, what can you do? It's horrible, but what can you do about it? It's protected by the First Amendment, or, you know, it's not a crime. What we're here to say is that there is something you can do about it. And this is a huge difference. We've set up a system where you can report it to 211, a simple dialing of 211 on your phone, or going to the website, laversushate.org. And the reason why we want people to report it is because once we know about it, we're going to make sure that you are offered the help that you need. And as was mentioned by previous speakers, whether it's mental health counseling, dealing with the trauma of it, just knowing you're not alone, but also we can offer you ways that you can actually take action about it, protect your civil rights. And so those are civil actions that you can take to stop it from happening, or to deal with, say, a business that might be allowing it to happen, or not being prepared to discourage it among their customers. We recently had a case, many of you may have heard about Hong Lee, a woman who was subjected to intense harassment by another man who was targeting her for race, for gender, blaming her for coronavirus. And she was able to file a claim that led to a meeting with the restaurant owners so that they could be better prepared at intervening and when that happens, and to deter such things from happening in the future by having signage that lets customers know that this is a place that is not welcome for hate and hostility based on race. So that is the kind of changes that we can bring if people report it. And I also want to credit what the chief said earlier. It's so important that the police department responds, but, you know, as he pointed out, if it's not a crime, they can't refer to prosecution, that the district attorney and city attorneys will deal with that. But it doesn't mean nothing can be done about it. And this is where we have been able to expand our resources that are available for the community. And I want to share that with you here. So first of all, I want to say that we want to help and be an adaptable campaign for any community, whether it's your city or your sports team. Here you can see Dodgers, but you know, here you see Artesia versus hate, Azusa versus hate. Cities can adopt this campaign and start to promote with their own art, their own approach, San Marino versus hate, Arcadia versus hate, to send a unified message that that city stands against the kind of hate acts that have or could happen in their community. Let me also say that we have adapted it specifically for the attacks that are happening now by having different Asian language messages. So you see here, Chinatown against hate. We've had one specifically for the Thai community because they suffered a terrible loss, a murder of a Thai American man due to an act of hate. We've made sure that our 211 partners are fully equipped in handling any Asian language. So you call 24/7, anytime 211 to report it, and they're going to take the call in any language and confidentially and free, and provide assistance to anyone who calls. And I just want to give you a sense of the kinds of calls that have been coming into our hate reporting hotline at 211. And you can see the vast majority are people being called derogatory names. This is important. This is exactly the kind of thing that has not been reported before to any one system. And so we, along with our partner, Stop AAPI Hate, we're able to get this information and then turn around and help people directly, but not only with the individual assistance, but with community change. And so, as I mentioned, we not only have worked with a restaurant to change their practices, but we offer support to schools to assist them in addressing bullying or hate incidents and help them figure out how they can deter it from happening in the first place, especially as students go back to school and return to campuses. We also work with city governments to figure out what are the best strategies for their cities to address the what's happening or what could happen in terms of hate crimes and hate incidents. And this is just some of our rapid response network partners. You'll recognize some of the names here, like 211 LA County, but the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council is there, the Asian Pacific American Dispute Resolution Center, Asian Americans Advancing Justice. We partnered with them to support the Hollaback bystander training that was mentioned earlier. We are really trying to expand the network so that everyone in LA County has not only a number to call, but there's going to be a partner community-based organization who can help them to go on with the more intense work of advocating for policy changes within their community. So I'm going to stop sharing and just wanted to kind of close my remarks by saying to you that this is a time when we really need to recognize that we're going to be stronger when we are supporting one another. And I know that I've seen amazing activism by a whole new generation of not only Asian Americans, but people from all different races standing up for Asians around the county. We need to remember that we need to stand up for one another, no matter the race of the victim. And when we do that, we're going to be the kind of community that builds relationships and trust and support for one another that will lead us to a place where we can have the vibrant and thriving communities that we know we can have that are free of any prejudice and inequity. I want to say that, in my lifetime, I know that I'm going to continue to experience hate. I know that by our stats that we collect from hate crimes all over the county, from all the police departments, that anti-Asian hate was already rising before the pandemic. So we know that with the end of the pandemic, it's still going to be there. And we need to recognize that this is a long-term struggle for us to build the kind of networks and relationships that are going to protect us against hate. And as was mentioned, we can't fight hate with more hate. It's about really recognizing the hurt that it comes from, the fear that it comes from, and understand it so that we can more effectively change the way people are acting towards one another. I know that the officials that are on the call today, as well as the community activists, you're an amazing group of leaders, and together, working together, and I hope you continue to work together, you have the ability to demonstrate the kind of healthy community that can be built to insulate yourselves, to inoculate yourselves against the kind of hate that we've been seeing. So I'm going to stop there and look forward to any questions that people may have. But really, again, thank you so much to East Meets West Club for holding this important event and asking me to be a part of it.
And thank you, Robin, for your presentation. And at this time, we've completed all our panelists. I want to thank the panelists for your exceptional service today and your insightful remarks, and frankly, your wholly different perspectives. I also want to thank our audience members for tuning in. I think this has been a great start. I know that East Meets West hopes to have many more of these in the future. And again, I think if we have these conversations, not only in the AAPI community, but for the City Club and the other organizations that are participants in our community, I think this is a first step forward. And last but not least today, I really want to turn this over to Annie Broussard, the woman who was responsible for putting this event together on behalf of the East Meets West Parent Education Club. And thanks to the president, Sophia Chan, who has put together a wonderful panel. So with that, Annie, I turn it over to you to conclude the program.
Thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to say, I'd like to thank all our panelists today. I'd like to once again highlight our speakers if you see the screen. Sorry about that. And also again, thank you for all the sponsors. Together we make this happen for this incredible webinar program. And thank you for all of you attending today. This is my sincere hope that you will share today's important and powerful message with your family members, colleagues at work, friends, and social media contacts. As a youth mental health specialist, I like to say it is very important to talk about how you were hurt when that happened, and because this is the start of healing process. We might all look slightly different because of our colors, skin colors, but we are the same human being. We are just one race. Finally, I would like to especially thank you, our moderators, Mr. Kelly Ryan, Mr. Isaac Han, and Chinese and translators Tina Wang and Eileen Gao, event flyer designers Queenie Nan, webinar host Dennis Vasquez. And this week, we will continue to send emails to everyone who registered for attending with all today's recording and the resources. And last but not least, our board member, Dennis Vasquez, will have a happy event announcement. And go ahead, Dennis.
Hi, everyone. That was an amazing and wonderful event. Thank you very much for everybody who was able to participate and share their views. So yes, we have another event next Saturday at 7:30 p.m. That's Mother's Day event. It's a bit of a talent show from all our wonderful kids and teenagers that are sharing some of their talent with everyone. So that's a Mother's Day concert, and we'll have also some of them featuring their pets at home and sharing how their pets helped them during the pandemic to survive isolation and confinement. And so that was the whole thing about our event next weekend, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. And that will be shared by emails, and that will be on the website of East Meets West as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.
All right, thank you all. See you next time. Bye now.